Welcome to Ivey's Insight, your video update of people, places, and issues important to Maryland's 4th Congressional District. It seems to me that it's unsustainable. We need to do something to address it. I believe the Second Amendment is important, but I think protecting second graders from being killed is important as well. Ms. Harris and Ms. Brame, Mr. Borgen, I want to commend you. I was a prosecutor for 12 years, 4 as a federal prosecutor, 8 as a local prosecutor in Maryland, which is kind of the birthplace of the victims' rights movement. And so I understand that what you're doing and the role that you play, in fact, it really transformed the criminal justice system in the 90s and the 2000s, and I encourage you to continue on. You don't need that. I can tell just by what I've heard from you today, you're going to sustain it and keep fighting on behalf of your loved ones, but I commend you for what you've done. I did want to say this with respect to whether this is serious or not, and I'm not going to look in people's hearts and try and judge the motives for whether these hearings are serious or not, or what's behind them, but I'll say this. We've got Republican colleagues who've introduced legislation to eliminate the ATF, eliminate the FBI. Mr. Trump called for defunding the Department of Justice and the FBI. As a former federal prosecutor, I can tell you that if you get rid of those 3 agencies, there's no federal mechanism or arm to actually prosecute violent crime at the federal level. That means terrorism, that means gangs, that means multi-state issues. The big takedown of the Sinaloa cartel on Friday, I think was the reason we were able to do that was because we had a strong federal government that was able to cross federal lines and international lines and complete those prosecutions. So I certainly oppose to defund the federal law enforcement arms that we've had discussions about. And with respect to the funding in general, I think even at the local level, the federal government can and has been helpful and should be more helpful too from a funding standpoint. I think it's right, we can't really meddle in local prosecutions per se, but funding for victims' rights, for resources, for training, for hiring and retention police officers, because I know police departments are competing now for a shortage of officers. So I think it's important for us to try and step in that way. But I would encourage my colleagues on the other side to speak about the specific types of proposals they would put forward at the federal level to address the local crime issues that you're talking about here today, because I haven't heard any so far. And what started happening in the 1990s was when a fist fight turned into a gunfight. That was the big change. And adding more powerful weapons, and you might recall that the 9mm came in, the cops got scared, they had to move up from revolvers, so then they got more powerful weapons. We had this escalation of guns on the street just in that cycle with the police and the drug dealers. Going along at the same time as that, we had the growth of guns. We didn't have 400 million guns in America 30 years ago. A big part of the problem right now is they're everywhere and they're easily accessible. We can talk about mental health and trying to track down men, who are or have caused crimes, and we should lock them up forever. The problem is we've got first-time offenders that are doing the mass killings. So if we leave all these guns easily accessible, like they are right now, we're going to continue to have these mass shootings every day. And so, look, I don't disagree. I don't want to say that your views on these things are somehow dishonest or anything like that. I'm not attributing bad motives to your views. What I am asking, though, is that from our perspective, certainly, maybe yours too, we've got to figure out something to stop these mass killings. I mean, it is just appalling now that the Alabama mass killing. I mean, somebody was talking about the mass shooting. I thought they were still talking about Nashville because they're coming so fast, it's hard to even keep track of them. We've got to come to grips with the fact that is not acceptable. We've got to figure something out. So when I look to you all, and you guys are pushing back at us, and that's fine, but when I look to you all, you're in the majority now. I wasn't here last year. And the only gun legislation we get through the Judiciary Committee is this one. And which we all know will do nothing either way to address mass gun violence. It just won't. And so, you know, is there anything you guys would accept? I mean, more background checks, banning ghost guns? Is there anything that you would put on the table? I mean, anything that might start to address the problem? Because right now, we're in a holding pattern. I think it was one of your colleagues over there that said, hey, you know, it's late at night. I'm not going to convince you. You're not going to convince me. Okay, fine. But there's got to be some kind of common ground. I can't believe that you all are comfortable with the status quo. And I get your point about, you know, having more guns on the street, or, you know, more people having guns. I don't think that's the solution. We had a conversation earlier. One of you was testifying about being in places where a lot of people have guns so you feel safer. But I was here when a guy walked into MPD, that's the police department here in Washington, D.C., and lit up the place. He killed police officers. Everybody's armed, he shoots it up. I remember the Fort Hood shooting in 2009. 13 people were killed. Everybody's armed and actually trained how to use their weapons to defend themselves. We had a shooting here in the Capitol as well. Somebody walked in and started shooting at people. It happens everywhere. Everybody having guns doesn't fix the problem. We've got to find a better way to go at it. And by the way, I've got 5 sons. One of them was a school teacher. And you know when he decided to go? When they started saying, like, well, you guys are going to have to get guns. Maybe that's the way to go. You know, fire drills going to active shooter drills. Mr. Roy, you want to talk about impact on our children that's negative and causing these kind of problems? That's got to be one of them. Rise today to introduce the Raise the Age Act. This bill would protect the public by raising the minimum age to purchase semi-automatic centerfire rifles to 21 years old. Currently, the buyer only needs to be 18 years old, even though the minimum age to purchase a handgun from a dealer with a federal license is 21 years old. The Raise the Age Act would apply the 21-year-old minimum age standard to buyers of semi-automatic centerfire rifles, just as it applies to buyers of handguns. Raising the age to 21 to purchase these kinds of firearms is reasonable and a crucial step, and I encourage all of my colleagues to support this vital legislation. Cybersecurity and the importance of what the United States needs to do to address it. Have you all heard about the leaks that came out? Okay, some of that information. Thanks for viewing our video update. Stay tuned to all my social media platforms for future Ivey's Insights, your latest and greatest goings-on for the 4th Congressional District.